We are coming to you today from a different set. We are here in the park at Gleisdreieck, which is pretty much in the center of Berlin. This used to be a freight terminal, actually even two of them, the Potsdamer Güterbahnhof and the Anhalter Güterbahnhof. The track system was still in use until the end of the 1980s. And after that, the whole area was under use and the park actually opened 10 years ago in 2011. Welcome to the third episode of the DILAX Lab as a special edition Sensing with Care. This mini-series is an extension of the talks that we had during the product launch event of the DILAX SLS 1000, and in this series we dig deeper into the discussions we had with our guests. So this is the perfect background for our topic today about livable cities and cities that are accessible and densified. We are all familiar with the 15 minutes city that Paris has become popular for. And in this area of Berlin, we are certainly lucky that a 15-minute city might be the reality for a bunch of citizens, but that is certainly not the case for everyone, and not everyone in Europe even. My guest today is Erik Ooms, who's involved in several projects with regard to changing cities and making them more livable and for everyone. Erik has been a researcher at the Leibniz Institute for Society and Space and just started a new position at Mobycon, which is a consultancy firm which aims to create sustainable transport solutions, especially for cyclists. He's also part of the Berlin initiative Schöne Städte e.V., and his new project Access Booster is concerned with accessibility in urban space. Welcome, Erik, and thank you so much for coming today.
Yeah, thank you for the invitation. Really good to be here again.
Yeah, good to see you. So we are here in the park today, and this is actually a very good example for urban planning and reusing and redefining urban space. Subway lines and railroad tracks still run through this area, but mainly it is reserved for people walking and riding a bike, for recreation and playgrounds. This area has transformed from a reloading point in the center of a city to a people-centered area. There are co-working spaces sitting at the edge of the park, conference and fair space in the old industrial buildings, a beer garden, small coffee shops, and it's surrounded by newly built housing districts. So this is a multi-purpose area. So Erik, if you want to change a former industrial area into a livable neighborhood, how would you start to develop it?
Yeah, let me first come back to Gleisdreieck. I think it's an amazing park. And I think a lot of people agree it has everything. It's a big transformation we've seen also here in the area. A lot of multifunctionality of what you said, nice coffee places, like even a brewery. New housing is being built here. Very good transport for sustainable transports by both by U-Bahn as well as by bike. So I think everyone is happy here. And it's not so easy, I think, to develop an area like this. Like some people think, oh yeah, you just make it like this and people come, but it's not like this. You really have to think this through as a planner. And there's more or less two levels you have to think this through. The first level is the strategic level of like, what do you want this area, if you have a big area in your city, what do you want it to become? How do you connect it with the neighboring areas? And for example, you want this area to become very nature friendly, you want to have a lot of birds, then you also have to connect it with the nature areas in the surrounding areas. Or you want this area to become like a hotspot for children to play around. And you know there's a lot of schools and children living around. You just want to make sure that these children can go there easily to this. So you really have to think of this as a strategic level. What do I want to reach, like as on a strategic point? And like we're talking about data here, of course, for DILAX. And then that's also like a lot of things you can use here, like data for understanding how many people use it, what kind of people use it. And you can also find like what people are maybe not using it. So on a strategic level, data can play a big role of understanding this. Then you have the second level, which is more aimed at the measures, at specifically dedicating places to specific functions. So for example, you have a playground here and you have a beer garden there and you have like, for example, a running course here. And for the measures you can also work with data, that's very good. But in this way you also have to involve stakeholders, because if you develop specific measures like a playground, it's very good that it's also used actively by children, of course. Or if you develop a nice running route here, and that's your aim, you want to make sure that like this running route is used. So then you involve, for example, the running club, and then you ask them, hey, what do you like? How could this park work well for you? And by working with all these stakeholders together, you can really make a park which is really used and really that people are really happy with. So this is like very difficult and it takes a long time, but I think you always have to look for the long-term perspective. Something just to mention about Gleisdreieck, it's a great area here, but there's also a lot of pressure coming from the sides. You see all these like new houses being built here, and there's a lot of plans also to build new houses there. And I think as a park, you also have to reinvent yourself sometimes. This park was designed 10 years ago when these houses were not there, maybe less people, different expectations. And then if you want to make sure that these people are still happy in 5 years, you have to think, okay, what more can we do? And also here you can experiment and use data for it, like see how can we make sure that this park is, for example, used by different groups at the same time or at different times, and you have to be more flexible and see what is possible.
Thank you very much, Erik, for all the insights about the Gleisdreieck Park. I think we all agree that we really love this park and how it's restructured now. Let's dig a little bit deeper into the strategic approach. Which opportunities do you see for such a multi-purpose use of public space?
Yeah, I think to answer this question, I think we have to go back to the history. I also did it shortly during the DILAX event last month. The history of planning and what we see as like what we want to achieve in a city. I think 40 years ago, 30, 40 years ago, it was normal to develop spaces very monofunctional. So we extended our cities and we said, okay, we want to develop areas specifically dedicated to specific functions. So we developed areas for living, areas for shopping, areas for working, all kinds of different schools, everything separately. And like we made big highways and everything, like crossing these things and connecting these with each other. And that narrative, we found out, is not sustainable. Like it's just a very, very like unsustainable way of dealing with urban planning, and for like also for humans, it's very unsustainable. Not only extra pollution from cars, but also you see obesitas level, people in the car all the time, and all kinds of like environmental, social, and economic negative effects. So this narrative needs to be changed around to a positive narrative where we go into like inside the city and reevaluate the public space that we do here and make it nice for everyone. Get rid of the car idea of like moving between all these functions and really make it multifunctional. And this is not easy for a lot of reasons. First of all, because we're in this narrative all the time. We've been talking about this already for 30 years, and to change this is not easy because people have been educated this way. And yeah, like you still have this influence, but it's also legally very difficult because every ground in the legal planning process has now its own different functions in the plan, and like just to change it, yeah, it demands like an entire change of the planning system. And also, for example, stakeholders which are involved in these planning processes, they think very much into their own minds, and they have to open up. For example, you see like the U-Bahn here, and that's the BVG, and they, very beautiful, just passing by. They are now really like a mobility provider, right? And they really think, okay, we have our function mobility and that's it. But if they would open up and become more flexible, they would also see, okay, we're also owning the stations, and we should make sure that the routes towards these stations are becoming more attractive. So they have to change their working methods, they have to be more blended, and everyone needs to be more blended. Everyone needs to be a little bit more loose into their responsibilities and their goals. And if you do this, then there's like way more possible. you just said something nice about multi-purpose. That's something else than multifunctional. Multi-purpose is that you have a specific area which you can use for multiple purposes. So for example, you have here this beautiful grass field, which could be used as a playground for children when there's a school around. But the school, of course, ends at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Then you can just open it up for the public. And there is some like functions which are very well combined, where you say, okay, if you move these together, then like you can have synergies, you call this. And there are some functions which do not really function well. You can have like the very nice co-working spot, but if you have a train line which made so much space, like a space and sound all the time, yeah, then of course co-working is not as much fun. And I think in these, like, you have to find these synergies, and you have to find these, like, understand also these conflicts very well. And you can, if you do this and you work with these different stakeholders together, you can really make like nice new combinations where you like have different types of functions on different time slots.
But hold on a second. To me, it sounds a little bit like we're talking about cities being more crowded, and this densification, what you mean, or what you refer to, doesn't sound that appealing to me, to be honest. But maybe can you elaborate a little bit on what you mean by densification and how this helps to make cities more livable?
I think that's also the problem of the narrative we've been hearing all the time, and we mainly see it in commercials, right? You remember, you see your holiday resort, of course, where you have your own private space, your private pool, but also a lot of people continuously hear this idea of like, okay, I have my private house, my private garden, it's the best for me, and also I have my own car to drive in. But the reality is not that these people are happier. The reality is that, and there's also research about it, there's people even in these denser areas where there's less cars because you don't need cars, you have the free public space. Children can just go play on the street. They don't need their private garden. And this this narrative needs to be changed around, and that's why densification is often seen as something, oh, wait, like we have to be against it, but you have to turn it around. It's an opportunity for your own area if it becomes densified. Because if it becomes densified, means that it's not only going to be more people living there, it also means that your urban functions you use are coming closer. So that means the supermarket you normally have to drive through with a car maybe far away, and if there's a lot of people living here, maybe there's like an opportunity for the supermarket to open like small stores there. Or, for example, co-working spots. If you have a very sprawled area, of course you won't have co-working spots, but then if you have like a nice dense area, co-working spots appear because there is also demand. So densified cities are just a very attractive way of living, but they're just promoted mainly commercially and in a very bad way. And that's something we also have to work on. I think it's a very big task, but like we have to work on this.
Thank you for the clarification. That sounds much better to me now. But yet you were talking about stakeholders and about making cities more attractive overall, and yet at the end of the day somebody has to pay for it and come up with the plan. So how can municipalities at the end evaluate if a new urban space or a redesigned urban space is working in the way it's intended?
Yeah, I think there's just different ways of evaluating it and understanding if it's really working. Data is, of course, like an important source to understand, like if people are happy at the place, if people use it. And we have DILAX. DILAX has a lot of data, but there's so much data available from like also smartphones. You can collect data, but you also need to collect data, qualitative data on like the happiness. You have to do interviews and understanding the people using the space. And I think if you combine these different data sources, both like understanding what kind of people use a space, are there children, are there elderly people, are there women, or are they not there? What did I do wrong in my measures? Do I have to change anything to make sure that these target groups also use a space? So this is what you have to do. You combine the data and make sure that you experiment, make new measures, adapt, and that all these stakeholders use the space.
That's very true. And in fact, DILAX does not own the data, but our customers do. So our customers who work with DILAX solutions for sure generate their own local data, and be it for an area like this. So at the end of the day, it is probably a combination of all sources of data which you mentioned, and where DILAX can help to support and generate data. And you are certainly not only researching how cities are changing, but also you are consulting on development concepts to practice what you're preaching.
Yeah.
And one of your recent projects is the Heinrichplatz in Kreuzberg here in Berlin. What was the challenge for you while you worked on this?
The Heinrichplatz is a beautiful place in Kreuzberg. It's built in the 1860s. Sorry, it's very old, beautiful architecture. And in the 1960s, 70s, they made a big planning mistake there. They made it into like an area which is car dominated. There's like big street crossing. There's a lot of parking, and the space is just very unattractive for people to pass by. On the bike or walk, or like even like children or elderly to move around. It's just very unsafe also, a lot of noise and air pollution. And we thought like, okay, it's nice to change this around, but it's not easy because it has been trialed before to change this. But what you can also see, there's some opposition there, and as soon as there's opposition, suddenly the entire plans fade away. So we thought we'd do it like a different way. We try to use the narrative of policy mobility. And policy mobility is more or less learning from policy measures in other cities and regions and applying it in your own city. And then we looked around, okay, Heinrichplatz, can we find? An area which is more or less similar, where the similar challenges were where you see like a different public space being created. And then I'm from the Netherlands, and I had a look in Amsterdam, and I thought, oh, this place, the Hugo de Grootplein, is exactly the same area, built at the same time, and they made a very nice roundabout there with a separated cycling lane, a lot of pedestrians, and the bars are popping there. People are very happy with the place. So the goal is not to go to the Heinrichplatz and say you have to do it like this, but to learn and adapt this place based on this best practice in Amsterdam. So our goal as an association is to bring these people and connect them with the network in Amsterdam and say, come on, learn. They also had to make their planning decisions, what is good, what is bad, and they can apply this in the Heinrichplatz. So that's what we try to do there.
And I hope your help was helpful for the ones who developed the project.
Yeah, we're still in the project itself, developing. We have a lot of discussions, and we try to organize excursions to Amsterdam with citizens also, and like government employees.
Very good. I think it's always a good idea to learn from each other. I have another point, which is mobility. And as we know, mobility is considered to be the nervous system of a city. So how do you integrate mobility into such a densified city?
It's very nice that you mentioned this nervous system as like for mobility, because it's something where a lot of researchers are a little bit against using this human body and especially the nervous system as a way to describe a city, because it has been misused so often that there's a highway and there's a traffic jam, and they say, oh yeah, the aorta is like, it's going wrong, so we have to build more capacity for the road. And that's why a lot of people are against it. But I think it's a very nice opportunity to use the body, what you just did, as a narrative. Because what you can also see, if I would describe our current cities at the moment, that is we're like getting fatter and fatter, right? We're a little bit obese. Our cities are, expanding still. Yeah. And then like the veins we have, where this blood and the nervous system, to connect all these body parts, we just have to go faster and faster. No, we have to go bigger and be faster, and like your body, you're just suddenly not relaxed anymore. You're getting a burnout. Your body like miles up, and I think that's a way to say like, okay, we have to change the cities like the human body. You have to also lose weight, and if you're maybe a little bit too overweight, and you have to make sure that your body relaxed and that your blood pressure is normal again. And that's more or less what you can also say to mobility in the system. Then the question is, of course, how do you do this? Because I can say like you have to do this, but there's a very good concept for this, and that's transport accessibility. And transport accessibility, the definition is maybe very important here. The definition of transport accessibility is the ease to reach destinations. So how easy is it for you to reach destinations and desired opportunities? So it's not about like going as fast as possible to your far away to like certain spots, but to understand how close are these spots and how easy are they to reach. I can give, for example, there's so many examples I can give. You, for example, need medication, and you because you need to go to the pharmacy, and you have to. Okay, yeah, you live here, and you're looking for a pharmacy, and if we have this very urban sprawled city, the pharmacy might be far away, and then you're like, oh yeah, it's very difficult to get there. I have to get my car. But if you have a very dense city, there might be a lot of pharmacies around, so you can actually go there. Yeah. But then you have to think like, okay, how easy it is to get there, to this pharmacy, because maybe there's a big street. So you have to think of different factors. There's a lot of social factors in playing around, and also affordability, for example. Can I go to this pharmacy, or is it a very expensive pharmacy? Maybe it's only for like unique products where you cannot get your medication. So accessibility is an integrated concept where you talk about this ease of reaching destinations. So you don't talk about mobility anymore, you talk about destinations, and you take all these different factors into account, from just the mobility itself, but also the distance, the affordability, can you get there, the digital alternatives, like the social acceptance. And if you take this, then you really see that you can really take measures also for this.
Very interesting again. Thank you very much. Let's stick a little bit with transportation. What is your vision for public mobility in the near future, and how should urban planning integrate different modes of transport?
I think, as I said, I think we have to de-haze, so mobility should not be a goal anymore in itself. We should not increase the mobility and more in German say a Pendelverkehr, more traveling around just for the sake of traveling. We need to work towards these dense, decentralized urban environments with nice kietzes where everyone can walk and cycle. And if you want to integrate transport in the right way, you have to think of mobility hubs. And mobility hubs are just very attractive places of public transport, where also which are very easy accessible by biking and by walking. And there's, for example, good cycling roads towards this destination, and also the mobility hub. There might be a library, there might be a coffee shop. So if you might have to wait for your bus for 15 minutes, you can at least chill and have a coffee. There might be also co-working spaces. So mobility hub is more than just mobility in essence. It's like an integrated urban dense hotspot where mobility and living spaces come together. So that's my vision. I hope that we work in the next 10 years on making a lot of these attractive mobility hotspots and stop moving from place to place for no reason, but really think, okay, there's also nice areas around, and we can just also co-work here and do my groceries there, and not go everywhere for no reason.
Thank you very much, Erik, for sharing your vision with us. I think this is very interesting. And my very last question would be, if you could develop one more district, which one would it be?
I have to think, because there's a lot of districts which have a lot of potential in Berlin. But specifically, I would focus on Ostbahnhof. I don't know if you know, Ostbahnhof is the former Hauptbahnhof, the main train station from the DDR. It's in the east part of the city, but it is a very central place. And before the Second World War, it was a very nice, dense areas with a lot of functions, a lot of trade also. And after the Second World War, they bulldozed it down a lot. Also, a lot of buildings were destroyed, of course. And it has been a big highway area where there's a lot of high-rise buildings, very unattractive, and big roads. It's very inaccessible for pedestrians and cyclists. A very unattractive way to enter the city also not really connected with other areas around. And there's just so much potential to do something here. You can say, okay, let's just do it as a technocrat, let's just design plans and do it like this, but I just talked about this concept of policy mobility of the Heinrichplatz, and I think we can also do this here. because in the Netherlands, in Rotterdam, there's a train station, Rotterdam Central Station, and it had more or less the same problem until 10 years ago as Ostbahnhof. It was also a very nice train station, like quite designed, but it was just like a lot of highways around, and it was not really connected with the city center and very inaccessible. And they really transformed this area into a super attractive place, also with a lot of bars. And it really has this like connection between the city center and the train station. And I think we should learn also from Rotterdam Central Station, and we should apply the best practices they have there in Ostbahnhof and really develop this area into like a new hotspot for Berlin, because it's so central, has so much potential, and until now I think it's a little wasted. So if anyone would give me the opportunity to work on this, I would be very, very happy.
Thank you very much, Erik. This is super interesting to learn from you. And if anybody is listening, Erik, as just said, is available and at your service to develop Berlin and further districts further. So as we are here in this beautiful park at Gleisdreieck, I think this is a perfect scenery to just show how livable cities and the redesigning of urban space, what it does for us in the city. And for our upcoming webinar, we will keep this focus but move a little bit away from the transportation aspect towards retail. And the upcoming webinar will be on June 24th. So if you have the time, we appreciate to welcome you there as well. And for now, as always, you will receive a short survey at the end of this webinar, so we appreciate your feedback, and if you have any further questions, feel free to get in touch at webinar@dilax.com. From my side, I wish you a nice day and a nice summer break. Thank you very much, Erik, once again for coming today.
Great.
I really liked our conversation and I hope you liked it as well, so take care and see you next time.